Specialist for the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health, and I am the lead program director of the Climate Justice Fellows. The Justice Fellows program is a groundbreaking initiative led by the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health at the University of Maryland. This 21-week immersive virtual training and implementation program is designed to equip individuals with essential knowledge about environmental justice and climate justice principles. The Climate Justice Fellows program places a significant emphasis on the Capstone Project, which serves as a culminating experience for our cohort members. This project is cohort members led, allowing our fellows to take ownership of their work while receiving guidance and support from myself, Dr. Sukobi Wilson, and Siege. The Capstone Project provides an opportunity for fellows to apply the knowledge and skills they have gained throughout the program to a real-world problem in a community. Now, by addressing a local environmental or climate challenge, cohort members can make a positive impact in their partner community and actively bolster environmental and climate justice initiatives. In this session, our fellows will present their capstone projects. Capstone topics within the session will focus on composting and food sovereignty within Prince George's County, Maryland, digital storytelling and exploring the aftermath of natural disasters, and maternal health and climate change vulnerability assessments. Fellows will showcase their community projects that are dedicating to making strides in addressing climate and environmental injustices. Welcome to the session. Our panelists are fellow Crystal Sue, who is a manager for EV Energy Management, MN8 Energy. We also have Azania Hayward James. She is principal and principal of the Chief Ethnographic Data Analytics and Technical Development Strategist within the Cornerstone Collective 2020 and DAM Consultants. We also have Peyton Albers, who is a senior here at the University of Maryland. And last but not least, we have Aja Jackson, graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome. Our first fellow will be Crystal Sue. Please join us at the podium, Crystal.
I'm Crystal, and I'm going to be presenting my project for this fellowship program about energy justice in Sunset Park in Brooklyn, New York City. So as Ariel mentioned, I am in the energy space, so I focused on renewable distributed energy. So that is what we're going to be talking about and how that technology can provide some energy justice. So about me and my project is that I am a native New Yorker and I'm a first-generation American, and also I am a first-generation college graduate and white-collar professional in my family. And I'm at MN8 Energy, and I am a manager there. And I'm also affiliated with Clean Tech Open Accelerator, which is the largest clean tech accelerator in the world by amount of people. And I studied environmental engineering and economics at Syracuse University for my educational background. So now I lead energy management for DC fast charging in partnership with Mercedes-Benz. This is a $1 billion North America fast charging network that is being built between MN8 and also Mercedes-Benz, where we provide financial capital with Mercedes. And before that, I led energy optimization at Electrify America, which is part of Volkswagen in America, for the largest North American deployment of DC fast charging coupled with batteries, which are supposed to help with cost optimization of deploying electric vehicle charging. And my background also includes inside distributed energy, in addition to fast charging, is also batteries and also residential rooftop solar, especially in California when it comes to equity, which is one of their defining principles when they create their energy policies. So that it's not only a matter of scaling technology, but doing this in an equitable manner as a fundamental principle and not as an afterthought. All of this ties together in this, I would call a passion project that I have called DER Project Fair, which I highlighted in the yellow. That is where I present a lot of these activities that I lead. So one of them is this book club that I led, where we tie together data justice with energy justice to show that there are a lot of principles in both of these fields that can really inform each other in terms of how do we further equitable data principles, and then also how does that define and translate in the energy space. So it's trying to share information between these two industries, and I also try to do that within my space in a technical arena and coupling that with energy justice. And I've also done this with net metering policy in California. So today we're going to talk about another aspect of this DER project that I lead is this energy justice in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And I wanted to focus on Sunset Park, Brooklyn, because I am from Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And so I wanted to look at how, the work that I do, how can I try to contribute from the energy justice lens to this neighborhood? So the first approach that I took is looking at the barriers to DER adoption in this neighborhood. So there's two components to this. The first is to understand the history of this area. What are the knowledge that exists in this place from lived experience and also existing data, and also understanding the location. So this comes down to, I would say, siting, and then also siting of energy sources in the past, and whether we can identify certain burdens and also opportunities for DER adoption. And so just to clarify, in case it wasn't clear, DER is distributed energy resources. So this is energy that is located at the customer site. So it's not owned by, let's say, like by Constellation or any of like these utilities. It's owned by customers. So like if you have an electric vehicle, that is a DER. If you have rooftop solar, that is a DER. And also if you have your own battery to store solar power, that is also a DER. And so part of the opportunity for DER adoption is that it creates a shift in the paradigm, because it's not only that the utility is creating, let's say, a solar farm and it's renewable energy, so it's better for the air quality and the environment. It has an additional value proposition in that the customer, because they own it, they have a sense of ownership. And so a lot of the benefits that utilities have, customers can also take advantage of. So part of that is like financial compensation for being able to provide resilience to the grid in the event of blackouts or the need to reduce usage. So these are all benefits from distributed energy resources that when we have customers owning energy assets, they are able to partake in the energy transition in an equitable manner because they have an ownership stake, and therefore they can reap the benefits, not just the utility or, let's say, financial institutions that invest in the technologies. And so I wanted to apply the fundamental principle of energy justice to distributed energy. And the framework that I have created from my other work in DER Project Fair is a framework where there's three simple elements, which are transparency, accessibility, and community engagement. So then I apply this to these three markers of energy justice to current and historic conditions of Sunset Park, DER technology, and understanding the New York City policy lens to see how do these three, transparency, accessibility, and community engagement, how do they map over to the policy arena in New York City, and where are their gaps? So for transparency, when I'm talking about the energy equity framework, I'm talking about whether or not the community can understand the discourse. So if there is some type of policy proceeding, and the community cannot understand or follow what the discourse is about, this is not going to be a transparent. This, just right off the bat, that's not transparent. Like without understanding what the topic is or getting into the details of that, if it's not transparent, it's just, we're going to have a hard time being equitable. And then the next to build on transparency is accessibility. So the solution needs to be accessible, because if it's not accessible, they cannot engage. So if it is transparent and the community can follow the story and the discourse, but they cannot access the proceeding and engage with it, then this is also going to hinder the energy equity. And then lastly is community engagement throughout the development, evaluation, and refinement of the proposed solution. So we need to ask ourselves throughout the entire discourse, has the community engaged with the discourse, and how have they engaged? Is it that we have a small select group of policy experts and economists coming up with the decisions and then asking the community in a survey fashion? Because that often happens. And when we have that, oftentimes it is because the process is not accessible. So the community is an afterthought. So all of these three are quite connected, and without one of them, it is quite difficult to develop an equitable energy framework. So now we're going to apply what we just discussed as the backdrop to Sunset Park, Brooklyn. So here, this screen grab is from the CGIS tool. So this is the federal tool for economic justice screening and environmental factors. So here I looked at a area in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. So you can see there is in the street where there's all these restaurant symbols, that's 8th Avenue, and that's where a lot of the Asian businesses are. So it's immigrant owned, and they open these small businesses. This is a big way that they create economic development in their area. So it's these restaurants and cafes and hot pot and this kind of stuff. And so this is an opportunity, because if there's all these small businesses, you can think about the amount of energy that they're using. And so we want to understand where the opportunities are. So first we identify this area, and we can see that it's identified as disadvantaged because it meets more than one burden threshold in the CGIS tool, and also associated socioeconomic threshold. So because I see that information there, then I dig deeper to understand what are the socioeconomic thresholds and what are the burdens in this area. So first, we want to look at Sunset Park, the racial breakdown. So we can see it's 70% Asian or Hispanic, and then 32% other. So from this slide here, I want to say this neighborhood in Sunset Park is basically 100% Chinese. But then there's another couple avenues down, 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue is more Hispanic. So, but all of it together is Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And then so here we can see as a whole Sunset Park, this area is 72%. They're not in the poverty section, and then below is 28. So it's basically 1 in 3 is living in the poverty. So we can say that there's a prevalence of poverty in Sunset Park. And when there's poverty, there's an indicator for other life outcome metrics. So that's why I look deeper into what those other metrics are. So one of the categories in CGIS is the workforce development. So that's what I wanted to look at, to see inside workforce development, where the opportunities are and where are the gaps. So we can see here that there's significant barriers to economic mobility, because there's the 91st percentile of low income status here. And this is in comparisons to the rest of America. So this is 91st percentile of low income is the characteristic of this neighborhood in Sunset Park. And we can see there is very serious linguistic isolation here as well at the 99th percentile. So these are all things we should keep in mind when we're talking about engaging with the community, is that this is a low income community and also faces linguistic isolation. So this brings to top of mind for the 3 principles I mentioned about transparency, accessibility, and community engagement, and really thinking about accessibility, because this signals to me that there may be some extremities here in terms of linguistic isolation that we need to consider when we're talking about engagement. And also for high school education, this one is actually quite high, because the threshold for this one in CGIS is the 10th percentile. So this is 5.5 times the threshold for the percentile that would flag a tract for high school education. This is a low level of high school education, which from my lived experience is accurate, because many of these are immigrants, and when they come here, they have very low education. So they either go to a trade school, or if they do not go to trade school, they are not able to enter the workforce in I would say meaningful, livable way. So this is part of the barriers that is happening in this neighborhood. So then the next metric I looked at is in another category, is the transportation category in CGIS. So here I want to understand more from the transportation area and understanding how that connects to health. So here we can see there's a health concern due to the diesel particulate matter. And oftentimes the diesel particulate matter is from the trucking industry, where the pollutants are these diesel particulate matters. And that maps out accurately to the traffic proximity and volume. And I think that the traffic proximity and volume is high. However, it's not in the 90 plus percentile, because with the trucking, there's the routing throughout the day that may not be throughout the entire day, let's say passenger vehicles. So that's why it's lower. But because they may show up early in the morning or late at night. So that could also contribute to why it's lower, because it's at set times of the day where you see these large trucks pass by. But when they do, the pollutants are very harmful to health outcomes. And then, of course, I mapped it also to give the context of like these low-income communities tend to have these types of siting issues when it comes to transportation and transportation routing and other types of environmental injustices. And then lastly, I looked at the energy metrics from CGIST. So from energy metrics, we can see that it's not super clear. So this is where I started to dig deeper, because we can see that energy cost it did not skyrocket like the other two, and nor did PM 2.5 in the air. However, PM 2.5 in the air, I can understand, because like I was saying about the routing of the trucks, this can bring it lower because of the timing versus passenger vehicles that are 24/7 transported across the highways. So because I see this, then I understand that there could be information that's not captured in the data because it didn't follow the flow of the other two. So there might be data that's not just simply analyzed just from like a bar graph from the CGIS tool. So that's when I thought that these energy metrics require analysis coupled with lived experience. And when we look at it in that way, we will find out that there's a peaker plant siting in Sunset Park. And that is what this project focuses on very much, is about peaker plants. So peaker plants are the dirtiest form of energy because they use the most high polluting fuel sources, such as natural gas, which produces these nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide, which contributes to poor health outcomes, like long-term damage to the heart and lungs. And you will see very high asthma rates for communities that are near where peaker plants are sited. And so the reason why there are peaker plants is because they are supposed to be available for extreme weather events or extreme demand, where there's extreme demand for energy. So when there's, let's say, like a heat wave and many people turn on their AC more than usual, then a peaker plant will turn on. And so they're not used often, and they're not paid for when they're used. They're paid for existing, which is what I highlighted here, for what there's called capacity payments. So a lot of tax ratepayer dollars goes to funding these peaker plants just to be available. And they are also paying for it with their health. And so this is like multiple levels of compensation through financial and also health compensation from these communities to keep these peaker plants online. And so in Sunset Park, there is a peaker plant on First Avenue, 53rd Street, that is the Narrows Generating Station. So for context, as historic context, when we try to understand energy justice and energy injustices, this peaker plant is owned by a hedge fund. And so because they, like I was explaining with distributed energy, where if you have ownership stake, you also gain the benefits of your energy source. So because this hedge fund owns this generating station, they have reaped the financial benefits of the Narrows Generating Station. And also utilities, because they are also part of this business model, they also reap the benefits when ratepayers, so like the people who pay electricity bills, they are able to make a return on investment from their ratepayers for having this peaker plant that is producing long-term damage to the heart and lungs. So then now we're going to talk about the proposed solution, because there is a plan to phase out the Narrows Generating Station peaker plant by next year. So the difference between the proposed and the equitable, the similarity, I would say, is that they want to phase it out. However, it's the way that they're planning to phase it out. So this is actually happening like right now, this discussion. So the proposed solution is that the hedge fund, the Boston-based hedge fund ArcLight, they would like to repower this generating station and use more efficient technology that is still natural gas, but more efficient, so it will lower the emissions from natural gas. But they will still continue to keep ownership. So they will still continue to reap benefits of this solution. And also it is a natural gas solution, so it's not going to keep us on track for the New York State climate goals, which are quite stringent, and they're quite ahead of the country in terms of the amount of progress they've made in terms of outlining quite detailed their climate action plan. So this would actually conflict with a lot of those goals, and also the Justice 40 initiative, which is actually based off of New York's plan of the 40% going to disadvantaged communities. Is started with the Climate Action Council in New York City. So this is the proposed solution, and they're still fleshing it out. But this is the tone that they've set. And so for an equitable solution is, yes, we do agree with the proposed solution to phase out this station. However, the question is, how do we do it? So the two components that I look at is, first, we should take a look at the unique profile of the community and center that. So from the exercise we did before with the CGIS tool, there was an area around workforce development. And the way that I think we should do it is be targeted and intentional with centering that profile. So we should do it through economic mobility and also making it linguistically accessible. I think that is the way we will get to workforce development. And so we should prioritize clean energy solutions that meet the New York State goals. So this is with solar and storage as a technology and also energy storage. And these solutions are on track in New York State. So then I look at these programs, and these are the two programs that New York already has. So this is a good starting point, which is the 6 gigawatts of energy storage and also the New York Sun Solar. So I analyzed whether it's equitable or not. And I would like to briefly say that these programs are on track to deliver a more equitable solution because they do not discriminate against a certain technology. And they actually try to follow market mechanisms that also are able to strike the balance between that and also not allowing for different customer classes to participate in the energy transition. And that's the type of solutions I believe that we need. So that's how I analyze it. They have a lot of open access information to increase the accessibility, to overcome the linguistic isolation, and also to allow those who may not have originally thought of these technologies to actually go on their website and look for financing options and also incentives, there's quite a rich number of incentives that are described there. So that's my closing remarks are that's how I would say we can start to think about embedding energy justice into clean energy transitions. It's about remedying current and historic injustices, and also in my case through distributed energy, and identifying the community representatives who can speak to workforce development and creating these implementations that are really important for embedding the knowledge inside the community for the policies and the funding decisions, which are like the two very key areas to actually actualizing, going from theory to reality. So this is what I found through my project. Okay, thank you.
Wow, thank you, Crystal. We have our next fellow, Peyton Albers. I will start the slideshow. Whenever you're ready, let me know.
Hi, so like Ariel mentioned before, I am a senior here at UMD studying environmental science and policy. And so my presentation today is going to be on City of Baltimore Food Policy and Planning Division.
Peyton, so sorry. One sec.
Oh, sorry. So my community partner is Jessica Fink, who is a food policy data fellow in the Department of Planning in the City of Baltimore. She specializes in community engagement, data analytics, and health policy analytics. She also is the person that reports to the mayor on how the division is spending the funds that they have been granted to them. And it kind of took me a little bit to find Jessica, so I was a little bit delayed in my project, so I was not actually able to work with Jessica in the community quite yet, but in the next coming months, I've been talking with her, planning on how I can get involved in some of the projects that she's working on. So today I'm just going to discuss the projects that she's involved in and kind of promote them. So the Food Policy and Planning Division oversees the Baltimore Food Policy Initiative, or BFPI. And this initiative has 3 pillars to it, interagency collaboration, the Food Policy Action Coalition, or the Food PAC, and then resident food equity advisors, or the RFEA. And so within these 3 pillars, these efforts seek to build equitable and resilient urban food systems. And these do work to address health, economic, and environmental disparities where there is high food insecurity. So the first one is interagency collaboration. So the BFPI involves the work of many organizations within the city government. So a lot of them are coming together, and it intersects throughout the Baltimore Department of Planning, Office of Sustainability, Baltimore Development Corporation, and the Health Department. So this initiative is similar to a model that was already done in Oakland, California. It was for a food policy council. And we kind of follow this model where city government initiates a food system study and then passes a city council recommendation to then create a food policy council, and then a nonprofit is selected to house the council. So that's a little bit similar to the BFPI with their work, but yes. And then these stakeholders collaborate and they take responsibility for the implementation of the recommendations that were set forth by the Baltimore Food Policy Task Force. And then the next one that we'll go over is the Food Policy Action Coalition, or Food PAC. So these food system stakeholders are going to be outside of the city government. So this could include restaurants or urban farm owners. So these stakeholders are currently working on local food systems projects in nutrition, hunger and food access, schools, gardening, sustainability, and urban agriculture. So there are over 100 stakeholders representing 60 organizations. And again, these are organizations that are outside of city government. But the Food PAC is not a formal decision-making body. So it's not a food policy council, but it is an advisory group. So it allows these organizations to meet about 6 times per year to provide updates and discuss policy issues that they might have with the food policy director. And so this kind of allows the BFPI and the city government to get involved with these organizations and hear their challenges or any issues and be aware of those and try to resolve them. So the next one, the next program would be the Resident Food Equity Advisors, or RFEA. Okay. And so this program really focuses on community engagement. So what happens is that Baltimore City residents apply to participate, and then the BFPI chooses a cohort with diverse demographics and diverse experiences with food access challenges. So they meet in order to kind of discuss those challenges that they face so that BFPI staff can gain a better understanding of them, and so that they can work together with the advisors to develop policy recommendations for the city to actually consider to implement. The BFPI specifically seeks representation from seniors, parents of young children, and Latinx community members. And then another point to this program that I find really unique and really important is that the advisors are compensated. So they are paid $17 an hour to attend 2-hour meetings once a month for about 6 months. And so this compensation, I believe, really does also contribute to racial equity by compensating these individuals for their lived experience, as communities of color are disproportionately affected by food insecurity or failing food systems. So then next, I'm just going to go over the Food Policy and Planning Division's $11 million American Rescue Plan Act proposal. So it's called the Improving Nutritional Security, Food Access, and Food Equity in Baltimore City During and After COVID-19. So the first, there's 5 pillars of this proposal. So they include, so 1, to continue COVID-19 emergency produce box distribution, and then also increase SNAP participation and distribute fruit and vegetable incentives to residents, expand nutrition incentives at farmers markets, implement a produce prescription program at MedStar Harbor Hospital, and then also to build the BIPOC local food supply chain by improving access to produce. For the proposal, the $11 million that they received from the city was a monumental long-term investment into the city's food systems. And this proposal does come with a lot of goals, both short-term and long-term. Short-term goals including to supply food insecure residents with healthy food options and to mitigate the risk of COVID-19 transmission, which was during the pandemic. And then also, they do have long-term goals to create a diverse and resilient urban food system that can overcome threats to the food supply chain through urban agriculture, establishing a produce prescription framework for the city, and developing policies that will incentivize and support food access and nutritional security. And then lastly, again, like I mentioned, I was not able to actually get to do some work with Jessica yet in the community, but we do have a couple of plans of how I can get involved with her and this division. So that includes attending the RFEA meetings and also serving as a note taker. And then some of the discussion topics that they might be going over within these meetings will include digital literacy and also online SNAP programs, where advisors can actually meet with representatives from Giant, Safeway, and Amazon about their online SNAP programs. And then also just a little bit more working with writing and then researching for projects, and also possibly getting introduced to GIS mapping. So even though it took me a little while to get connected with the community partner, I'm so grateful to have found Jessica, and I'm so excited to work with the Food Policy and Planning Division to gain real-world experience with community engagement and creating resilient urban food systems. Food justice is environmental justice, and I look forward to gaining experience and eventually finding a related career. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peyton. I just would like to interject and say what a variety of topics we have within our panel today. And also just to let the audience know that these capstone projects are meant to be first stages or second stages and meant to just continuously work within these communities. So it's okay, Peyton. It's very difficult to, I know that was one of our challenges. You know, people are very busy right now and just trying to work with community partners, and they are definitely have their own stress levels and are at their capacity. And within the summer, everybody's moving very quickly. So that's okay, Peyton. But thank you for this lovely presentation, and Crystal too. I mean, I can't wait for the next one. We do have Asia coming up next, and I will start the presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Asia Jackson. My background is biological engineering with a concentration in natural resources from North Carolina A&T, but I'm also pursuing a master's in sustainability. And today we're going to be talking about justice for St. Croix, and it's going to be up there soon. Thank you. So with Justice for St. Croix, I really, you can go to the next slide, please. I really wanted to use the power of storytelling to highlight how corporate irresponsibility, climate change, and limited resources really increases the vulnerability of a community, and how these factors, as they continue to increase, we see how communities' environmental and public health, it starts to degrade. And when that starts to degrade, we see community having a harder time to be able to recover, to be able to resist, and then to also be able to move forward and be sustainable. So I'm hoping that by the end of this short docuseries, once it's fully created, that we can ask ourselves, can a company be sustainable if an environmental justice framework is not included in the process, and they're not thinking about how they are impacting people in the future and how they impacted people in the past? Next slide. Okay, so this is just going to be an interview that I had with Jennifer. She is St. Croix Environmental Association. She's the executive director, and we're going to be talking about what happened in St. Croix and the corporate irresponsibility that took place, how this community was forced to deal with inhaling sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and the effects that came from it. So if you can press play. and you can end it at like 13 minutes. In spring 2021, Lime Tree Bay Refinery showered the community with petrochemicals. There was a technological breakdown that occurred. Oil droplets were released in the sky and carried west by the wind. Can you please describe what that experience was like?
And just to be clear, there had been a couple of other incidents with this refinery, which had only at that point been open a matter of months at that point, including gas clouds, visible gas clouds and odors and releases that were making people sick. But this particular incident we saw because there was visible fire, visible flames coming from one of the towers at the refinery, and which of course produced smoke from what was burning in it that people were smelling, and it was making them sick, and you could just see it. And so at finding out that not only was this a big fire, but there were oil droplets all over throughout the whole west end of the island. So this refinery is located about mid-island, and there's a good 8 miles of island beyond that. And I live near the end of that. And, my neighbors, folks in my part of the island were affected by it. We spoke to a lot of people we kind of were investigating this a little bit more and more. And we spoke to a lot of people and found out that, this affected people's gardens, killed a lot of plants, gardens that people rely on for food. But probably most significantly is here in St. Croix, a lot of us get our water by collecting rainfall on our roofs, which then goes into a cistern, and that water is used for drinking, for bathing, for washing, everything. And if you have petrochemicals on your roof, it's going to go into your water system. And again, we've talked to many people who to this day still can't use their cistern water. And people, again, all sorts of things, people getting sick. A couple of folks, their pets died because they were drinking the water. Some people lost all of their laundry, all of their clothes because they washed it in this water. And it's no small thing to replace and clean a cistern or replace and clean thousands of cisterns, because that's how many people were affected.
Was there anything set in place to help the community during this time since they didn't have access to the basic necessities?
Not immediately. There eventually was, because of the outcry from the community, the refinery set up water distribution where people could go and pick up bottles of water and use that for their homes. It's obviously, there's all kinds of problems with that. Obviously, you'd rather not have to go wait in a really long line to get water. They were all in plastic bottles, small plastic bottles, which contributes to our landfill and to, in perpetuity, basically, you're having all this extra plastic. Plus, it's not really enough to replace, you're not going to put bottled water into your washing machine, it's not enough to take a full shower with. So it was a stopgap, and it certainly was okay for drinking water for a little while. But those distributions actually continue to this day. So we're talking 2 years later, where people are just having to rely on picking up water rather than having, the source that we're used to. And that's a lot more sustainable.
I know a lot of community members did express how they couldn't breathe. That was something that we heard often, how they were strangled by asphyxiation because the emissions were so strong that it was creeping even into people's homes, where they had to leave their homes and get in their car and drive upwind. I'm upstream, just to be able to breathe and sleep at night. So can you talk more about that and also the displacement that occurred because of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it really was that bad, and with no warning. I mean, I can tell you my own personal experience. Again, I live 7 or 8 miles from the refinery, so I'm not even. There are people who live right up against the refinery, and obviously it was so much worse for them. But I remember waking up, not knowing what had happened because we didn't know the refinery had opened, and just feeling tightening in my chest and not able to breathe, and walking around trying to figure out what was going on. Did we have a leak in the house? Was something going on? And I walked outside and realized that it was everywhere. People who were closer, people who had small children, people who already had, maybe pre-existing respiratory issues were really, really suffering. I mean, medical emergency type of suffering, and not everyone can leave. Some people did. I know people who just put their kids in the car and drove to the other side of the island, but there's nowhere to, just sit and be. You can't just hang out there. There are no shelters, or anything like that. So you're basically driving around in the car. Hopefully you have friends on the other part of the island that maybe you can sit with, but it was nearly every day. So, it started one day, we were figuring out what was going, but then it happened and it would die down for a little bit. And then all of a sudden at 3 a.m, you would wake up and just feel like, when you have those really bad dreams where you think you can't breathe and you wake up from one of those, except that you still can't breathe. It was really awful. And I know, and it just saying like, I remember thinking to myself, how are we going to live like this? Like, this can't happen every day. I had the luxury of being able to go to an office that was downwind from the refinery. And that's the only relief I had. But not everybody, most people don't have that. And to think like this is just going to be our life from now on, that's crazy. So that's kind of when we started trying our best to figure out what was going on and to start advocating for some oversight of the refinery.
So you talk about the fact that how people were displaced and not everybody has the luxury, which is a common thing for especially whether it's mid or low income people, don't have the luxury to leave when a disaster, whether it's a natural environmental disaster or corporate challenge is happening, like they don't have that luxury to just pick up and leave and go somewhere. Was there any type of reparations or any funds given to help people go somewhere else, to put them in homes so this way they weren't homeless, their kids, newborns, you're talking about pets, elderly who probably, like you said, have other type of might have other type of diseases that they're dealing with. Was there anything done on that end?
Nothing. No, nothing at all. Yeah. We are, so there's the issue of, not having resources, individually. But then also we're an island, so there isn't that much room to move. We can't you can get in your car and you can drive a couple miles one way, but it was more than half of the island that was affected by this. Everything downwind was feeling it. So there's just, you can only go so far, from that perspective.
Population of. And can you tell us what exactly is the population for the downwind that was impacted by this? It's about 20,000, I believe.
Yeah, it's about that, give or take. Yeah.
So I can't imagine that many people trying to scatter, figure out what's going on, not in the loop. Was there any type of notice that was given out to the community saying, hey, this happened with Lime Tree Refinery, there's been an accident? There was no notifications given out, no warning, so that other people knew what was going on.
No, there really wasn't. There was a school, a high school that closed right nearby. Because of that, there were businesses that closed. The BMV closed, our Bureau of Motor Vehicles. So there clearly was something happening, but it just wasn't, being treated as the emergency. I think that it really was.
So at this point, there's an outcry of the community, and they're stating.
Thank you. So yeah, about the situation in St. Croix, there has been multiple violations that took place with Lime Tree Refinery. I mean, from 1970, I believe, to 2008, they released like 1 million gallons of petroleum into their only aquifer. We have where the system was actually shut down, and it came back on due to the Trump administration. Wanting to make more money, thinking about the economy. But when you look at the challenges that the community had to deal with, is it worth having this refinery there and they're not having the proper protocols that's necessary? There's no proper maintenance. There wasn't as many air monitors outside of downwind, so they weren't able to figure out on what scale was this challenge happening. So like moving forward, my goal in the process is to meet other leaders. Working on this docuseries requires a lot of research. So it requires for me to, right now in phase 1, doing the research, the virtual interviews, understanding how does this problem affect St. Croix, but then also how does climate change happen? So we have category 5 hurricanes that took place. There was 2 of them. We have Hurricane Maria and we have Hurricane Irma. After that devastation, we're talking about in spring 2021, that's when Lime Tree Refinery had their major explosion. And mind you, from these hurricanes, most people, their roofs weren't repaired. So imagine how strong these fumes are if you don't have a proper enclosed space. So at this moment, we're working on moving forward. And by next year, I hope to be in St. Croix and actually get in-person interviews, actually work with the community members to understand how they were affected and to see what is it like now moving forward. Clearly, they don't have as many resources. So if you want to, go to St. Croix Environmental Association organization website, and you can always donate to their causes. But thank you very much. That is Justice for St. Croix. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asia. Thank you. Before I introduce our next panelist, I just want to ask you all to move down a little bit because we want to ensure that you are in the screen. Thank you for your patience. I'm just going to, oops. I apologize. Thank you for your patience. We did have some difficulty with this presentation, so that's why the slides were not up. So. Okay, our next fellow is Xenia Hayward James. You have the floor, Xenia.
Very good. So, Ooh, it's my turn. Oh, wow, I'm bringing up the rear. I'm super excited. So my name is Azania Hayward James, and I am the principal of a consulting firm that I started right after the pandemic got off. Left my nice, comfy sort of government job and started this firm. So I'm the principal ethnic data analyst of the Cornerstone Collective, and I previously worked in data analytics, but I found out that it was very important to focus that effort or that skill set in community-based organizing, because a lot of times we have the passion, but we also need the numbers behind it because data drives decisions. And so that was the start of my organization. Another link to that is the topic that I'm speaking about today is African American or Black maternal health and mortality. It is a problem, even in the first world, as the US is known, that is more egregiously occurring more than any other so-called developed nation around the globe. It doesn't matter if the woman has, because we say, get education to the community, lack of education, a lack of knowledge, get jobs, build wealth, buy a home. And I have more friends that I can tell you who are dealing with infertility and have all of those things. I can tell you, and I always like to start with personal stories, that ethnographic data, that's what that is about, sharing our lived experiences, and especially when we're working with communities and vulnerable ones. They may not have the laptop or the technology to know everything that's going on, but they live it every day. And that, what they see, they live and breathe, is real data. It's qualitative data and it's ethnographic and it tells a story. A lot of times when others go into these communities to do research, that data is very valuable. A lot of times the community doesn't get to get the benefit, like they tell their stories, and a lot of times they're forgotten in the bylines of the white paper. So I chose maternal reproductive health, reproductive justice, mortality, and particularly in African American Black populations, because it is the highest of all populations in the United States. Black women are dying at a rate of 3 times more than all other races. The closest that gets to is our sisters who are Native and Indigenous women, but Black women are at the top, again, regardless of their economic status or their education. So we have to change that. So what you see on here is a woman who is African American and talking specifically about abortion, but access to all health care for whatever reason is needed is a part of the problem why we have Black women dying. And so I wanted to start with that kind of opening, and then we're going to look at a little bit of a video that talks about a couple of families who are dealing with this issue close and personal.
Remix your routine. Make it a Hidden Valley Rant.
Gotta love YouTube.
It's just about to say, sorry.
But we're amongst family. We know how it is. So
African
here it
American
is.
mothers dying at a higher rate than any other racial or ethnic group from childbirth-related complications. Families affected by this tragedy share their stories on the day their lives changed forever. Janae Norman has this report.
What was supposed to be the start of a new life turned out to be the end of another. 26-year-old Amber Rose Isaac was preparing to give birth at the height of the coronavirus pandemic in New York City in April, when everything changed for her partner, Bruce.
And I just remember staring and, looking at her face and seeing how scared she was, panicking a bit. So I'm telling her, yeah, we're going home. This is what we prepared for. This is what we're ready for. It's time. And she looked at me and said, yes, all three of us are going home. And that was the last time I seen Amber.
Amber posted on Twitter about, quote, dealing with incompetent doctors. She died 4 days later. Bruce says Amber tried advocating for herself, but doctors just wouldn't listen.
She voiced her concerns to her OB. She was letting her know, she's not feeling right. She's feeling a lot of discomfort. She's having shortness of breath. And her OB didn't really understand. She was like, oh, well, there are other women who are working while they're pregnant. So that right there just told me she didn't really care about Amber.
In a statement, the hospital spokesperson saying 94% of our deliveries are minority mothers, and Montefiore's maternal mortality rate of 0.01% is lower than both New York City and national averages, adding any maternal death is a tragedy. Amber's story is not uncommon. July 2nd, 26-year-old Sha'Asia Washington died during an emergency C-section. And July 27th, Yolanda Kadima, a doula and mom of 7, died giving birth to twins, also during an emergency C-section. Experts like Professor Deirdre Cooper Owens, who's written about how race and gender impacted American gynecology, say the struggles these women face throughout their pregnancies and childbirth all come down to racism.
You see that class and status tend to matter. The higher up you go, right, the kind of better protected you are. That doesn't exist for Black women because we're all experiencing racism in the same way. So when I walk into the office, nobody knows if I'm married or have a PhD or what my income is. The assumption is I might be lying. Maybe I'm promiscuous. Maybe I don't eat well. I should still be given fair treatment and equitable treatment by my doctor.
My first pregnancy, my birthing experience was pretty traumatic. And then he actually punctured my spinal cord. I was temporarily paralyzed.
We were so excited about bringing Jason to this world, and then the last 2 or 3 days of his birthing process was too tragic.
I was bullied and I was abused emotionally and physically, in the sense that consent was not asked for as often as it should have been.
It took me a while to find a provider that I trusted and that respected me.
We lost him due to what is known as HELP syndrome. We found out later on that his death could have been prevented, as well as the traumatic birthing experience that she experienced.
So many Black families with similar stories, and these experiences add to a mistrust between the Black community and the medical community, a relationship with a long, dark history dating back centuries.
Enslaved Black women were experimented on, particularly during the 19th century, so a little bit in the 18th century, but largely in the 19th century, as obstetrics and gynecology became more formal and accepted branches of medicine. Marion Sims, known as the father of American gynecology, pioneers the surgery to correct this obstetrical fistula condition. People didn't know that he experimented on enslaved women. They didn't know that 2.5 years into his experimental trial, when his white medical assistants quit, he trained these enslaved women to serve as nurses. They were still his patients. They were still his slaves that he either owned or leased, and they still served as surgical assistants. So that part of the story was left out.
The success of James Marion Sims earned him the nickname of the father of modern gynecology. But his legacy is marred by the fact he earned it on the backs of Black slaves through non-consensual human experimentation without anesthesia. Now, doctors like Jennifer Lincoln, also an OBGYN, are fighting against present-day health disparities.
To this day, Black people are less likely to get the same treatment in terms of pain medication. They're more likely to wait longer in the emergency room. They're less likely to be taken seriously. It's a holdover from the days of slavery. And in my field, this plays a huge role in the Black maternal and morbidity crisis. The call to action: doctors, nurses, anybody in the medical field, check your implicit bias.
Staggering statistics show Black women in America die during childbirth nearly nearly 3 times more than white women, making the United States one of the most dangerous developed countries in the world for Black women to give birth. And doctors say the issue for mothers extends through pregnancy and postpartum, and also impact Black babies, who are more than twice as likely to die than white babies.
So higher rates of complications related to childbirth and pregnancy as well. It's huge. And
so, questions in your heart about that. So yeah, this is a really important issue. And the intersectionality with climate change exacerbates these outcomes. Before I go on, I would be remiss because I had to give a dedication that is really important. So I want to venerate Sister Dolly Burwell. She was one of the activists in Warren County in the 1980s who really was that was the impetus around the Black environmental justice movement. And she was a mother of 2. And so I wanted to venerate her in this space of talking about African-American reproductive justice and the intersectionality of environmental justice and climate change. So thank you so much. So we can move. So like I said, data drives the decision making. And basically this is what is just giving you some vision of the data, what it looks like for what the video talked about. You see the numbers, they're clear, right? Who's at the top? Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Again, this is over a 4-period time. And so you would think with all the technology that we have, all the money that is invested in so-called the health care system in the United States, we're missing a huge population of women, Black women. And Black women make only 14% of the US population, but we're at the top of this. And this is a continuum. It hasn't slowed down. And then I think about this, and I want to point out, when we talk about what we invest in, I always say the children are our future. Some people say the children are leading us now. But when you think about the efforts or the campaigns that are going on around the country about history, number one, how many of you knew how the father of gynecology started? How many knew that? So I'm a public health student. My background was at Spelman was pre-med. We didn't get taught that even at Spelman and HBCU. I didn't find that out until a couple of years ago. So that is the problem, but we're talking about not teaching history, and particularly to young women and men who still get pregnant. We still have an issue with teen pregnancy. So a part of this wanting to do with the project that I want to be working on is about community engagement at the forefront, because you can't serve a community without bringing them to your side. You get permission to come into their community and walk with them through these different circumstances. So I wanted to go to the next one. Again, so this is pregnancy-related mortality rates. Again, the data is clear. I don't have to point it out again. Let me go to my slides. I wanted to talk about what my strategy is. So currently I'm working on a collaborative, and one of the things that we really emphasize in the fellowship, the Climate Justice Fellowship, is around community engagement, and definitely engaging collaborative partners, people who have boots on the ground, have investments. And one of the persons I was really impressed with, and her name just went right out of my mind, but she was a part of the Baltimore City Land Trust.
Shonda Campbell.
Yes, and I was so thrilled by her presentation. Through the climate justice, we had weekly curriculum that included not only readings, but it also had real people coming in to talk to us who were boots on the ground, working in the particular areas of environmental justice and climate change. And that was really powerful. And the presentation that she made was really powerful because they were talking about the presence of an incinerator in their community that has been adversely impacting people, again, poor air quality, poor air pollution, and asthma rates and other COPD conditions across generations from children to grandmothers. So the what I would like to do, and I was one of the ones, unfortunately, I didn't get paired with community partners, although that's one that I'd like to. John Hopkins Bloomberg also has a maternity mortality program surveilling what's happening with Black women and birthing outcomes. And so my goal is, again, I was saying I'm partnering with, through a collaborative partnership, working in Baltimore, Eastern Shore, and Montgomery County around climate change and resiliencies. And in these three places, the goal is to establish resiliency councils with community members who live in the areas that impacted. The one that is already started is in Baltimore. And so what I'd like to do is partner with them, because I want to look at the intersectionality of the reproductive health and also the impacts of climate change, particularly on African American women who are pregnant postpartum up to a year, because it exacerbates the health condition of these women. We can go to the next one. So as I said, the continuum of pregnancy, before they get pregnant, after the birthing process, and particularly postpartum, because there's a behavioral health component to this. A lot of people have postpartum depression, and a lot of women have used substances, or they have actually committed suicide or killed the baby. So it's a very difficult time, because when you're talking about climate change, you're talking about what we have experienced this summer. Extreme heat. The heat index has gone up 1.2%. The earth is hotter than it's ever been. I can't even imagine that, with dinosaurs working around, and we're hotter now. And then next year, the projection is that it will increase to 1.5. It's hot. Stevie Wonder said it's hotter than July. I think it's hotter than August, September, and the rest, because it was truly a hot summer. I like to throw in those things because I'm a music head too. So this is the first part of the program that I hope to develop in partnership with these resiliency hubs. Because when you talk about resiliency hubs and address to climate change and adaptation, you're talking about a safe space that people can come if their power goes out. I don't know about you, how many of you have, and I like to get audience participation too, how many of you have experienced power outages lately this summer? Did anybody besides me? Yeah, I recently just got back from a trip and had to go to a hotel, and I was working on my presentation and the lights went out. And I was like, oh my God. And I spent the next 5 days in a hotel. Now, everybody can't do that. I had to do it. I had no choice. But people don't have the resources. When you're talking about the communities that we're working with, we're dealing with a lot of cross-sectional intersectionality. Food deserts, food insecurity, housing insecurity, people having to make the decision to pay bills or buy medicine. So that's why this is really important. And then when you look at the conditions that are happening to a population that already has a high vulnerability. Preeclampsia is when the pregnant woman's her blood pressure is high, and she also has like edema, holding fluid. These all lead to death. These are some of the primary reasons why women die in pregnancy. To the right side. And then, like I said, adding the layer of climate change with the extreme heat, everybody doesn't have air condition. Our elders are vulnerable. Our medically vulnerable already is amplified by this. So again, this one of the things that we really want to look at through this project. So that's the first strategy, is to address those things. These are more, so we can go forward. The second part is to set up a community-led African American maternal morbidity and mortality climate impact surveillance registry. And that definitely comes straight from my CDC life, ATSDR. And the registry really would track the health outcomes of these women. So that's where the partnership need comes in. And like I said, I already know that John Hopkins Bloomberg here in Baltimore, not here, but in Baltimore, has a registry, and they're doing work in the community with the community that is ethnographically centered. So that's one partner that I identified. And so the other part, because of this time of where we are with climate change being funded in terms of policy by the current administration, like the IRA and the Justice 40, my goal is, I always tell my team, when I go to provide technical assistance to communities, I want to replace myself because they live there every day. I can't come, and I shouldn't have to come, but I can help to build capacity so they can. So the second part of this strategy too is to establish an education and training pipeline program to build capacity to run M3. And we may have missed what that is, but it's maternal mortality and morbidity. That's the M3. I like to come up with catchy phrases. Surveillance registry. So that involves also not only community members, but also students. Particularly, I like to go with students, one, who have an interest from whatever university they're attending, but specifically for HBCU, because one of the things, there's like 2% of African-American doctors. And even in the video that you heard, the gentleman was talking about his wife, and he said it was a woman. Sometimes because it's a woman, and even sometimes if it's African American, I can tell you personally, my oldest daughter had my first grandchild. I have a 2-year that I'm in love with. Her name is Anaya Marie, and yes, she governs us all. But my daughter was vegan. She decided that she wanted to have a birthing space. She didn't want any medication, so she had a whole birthing plan. She's definitely my child, and I love that. When we got to it, it was during COVID. So the other thing was no family member other than the father could go in there. But sometimes you need your mama in certain circumstances. So even just that emotional piece for her, and she suffers from anxiety, was a lot for the entire family, right? So that being said, everybody is not culturally competent. And that's one of the things, even when I was at CDC, that we pushed, that the doctors, some actually came from Harvard. They already had their medical degrees, but were getting an MPH. And those were the things that we emphasized and brought training to them, because that's serious. My daughter had an African-American male OB-GYN. And what he said to her, it gets me mad every time I think about it. He said when it came to having to do an emergency C-section. This is her first baby. She doesn't know. She doesn't have her mom with her, her sister, her grandmother, her auntie. And he said to her, and this is what she told me, he said, listen, you want to have your birthing plan, or do you want a dead baby? To someone this is your first baby. Anxiety is already there. Why would you say that to a young woman? And like I said, he was an African-American man, but this is not being taught. And that's why I focus on the ethnographic data. We have to center our work on the cultural reflex of the people we serve, whoever they look like, and however they show up. And so that is really important to me. The training needs to happen, but we also need to have boots on the ground in the communities with those skills. Like even in the video you heard that one of the sisters said that she was a doula and she still had a problem. I want to tell you the data around so-called emergency C-sections. It's very financially lucrative for doctors. And if you look at the numbers, you see that the number is up. Not unnecessary, but it's financial. And if you look up that history, the American so-called health centers was monetized a long time ago. The only people who could be doctors were white, rich men without the even training that we had today. That's a legacy. It's not to batter anybody. It's what happened. It's the evidence. And in order to solve a case, you need evidence. And so we like to tell the truth, and we like to lead with evidence. So this is the little acronym that I came up with the womb care. Womb is women wellness opportunities or options for mothers and babies. So in the center of anything I do is the people that I'm targeting. They have to be up front. And CARE stands for Community Approaches to Remedies and Resources to Eliminate Preventable, because most of these conditions that I've shared with you today are preventable. Preventable maternal morbidity and mortality. The engagement strategy, as it says, is to identify, which I have done, the community-based resilience centered community partners. I said in Baltimore, Eastern Shore, and Montgomery County, development that support sustainability strategies through a social determinants of health, that's an acronym, lens, and to support the building of thriving communities. So that's the two parts of the initiative I'd like to start as a result of my experience here at the Climate Justice Fellowship. I learned a lot because Ariel, Dr. Sakobi, Pam Bingham, and all of the other people, our speakers that we had, and even my colleagues. It was just an amazing experience. And I always tell people, I don't even know how I got into this Justice Fellowship, but I'm so glad I'm here because I really have made a network of colleagues that I really respect. And I really appreciate the things that they've brought in terms of the programs that they seek to. I didn't know you, Asia. You went to St. Croix, so it was really wonderful. So my lessons learned is that we have to replicate this. This can't be a one and done, and I think I understand we are the inaugural class.
Yes.
Yes. So I hope we brought a lot. There's more to do, but it was really good. The curriculum was amazing, and more important was you, Madam. The coordination that you did, the sensitivities that you have, the support that you provided to us were wonderful. So when you get to my last slide, I do talk about, those are the communities, the thanks to Dr. Sakobi, Ariel Wharton, Pamela Bingham, Lynn Riley. I hope I get my stipend. And the entire class, my colleagues. It was a wonderful experience. Yeah, that just happened today. Look, I tell the truth.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists and just the entire program. I do agree. I feel like this was very family feeling. And, you know, when you say family, it sounds very toxic, but I meant it. I definitely, I'm always happy to continuously be that support with you all. You all have my number and my email. So with that being said, thank you so much. With respect to time, you know, we have been over. So thank you for joining us for Climate Justice Fellows Session 3. I hope you enjoy the lunchtime plenary and have a good day. Bye.